Hi, this is Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton with our weekly update here on social media. Thanks for joining us on this important day here in Washington, D.C. A lot going on, obviously, with the release of the famous memo on the FISA warrants targeting the Trump team. We have a new dossier we just uncovered. President Trump tweeted a statement by yours truly today in the run-up to the release of the Nunez memo, as some are calling it. And then on top of that, the number 2 at the FBI is no longer the number 2 at the FBI, Andrew McCabe. He's been forced out this week. Plus, we have a new lawsuit on the FBI or the FISA collusion issue with respect to getting the underlying documents that everyone else is writing memos about. So a lot to talk about, but first up, the memo was released today. This is the famous Nunez memo created by staffers on the House Intelligence Committee that summarized some findings related to efforts by the Obama administration and it looks like Rod Rosenstein of the Trump administration to justify the spying on the Trump team, namely Carter Page, who was a volunteer advisor to the Trump campaign. And it looks like, according to this memo, as we suspected, the Obama gang misled the court. And what did the court, well, how was the court misled? Well, they put the FISA application, information about the collusion from the Clinton dossier in the FISA application to the court for the warrant. They didn't tell the court the dossier was paid for by Hillary Clinton and the Democratic National Committee. They didn't tell the court at one point that one of the sources for the dossier, this Christopher Steele, the UK spy, was cut off from the FBI. They didn't tell the court any of that. And Andrew McCabe, the number 2 of the FBI, has admitted that they would never have gotten the FISA warrant to spy on the Trump team but for this Clinton dossier. So I want you to think about that. This is all in a memo. The memo is widely available on the internet, so you can read it all in black and white. So I'm summarizing it for you here. There be no FISA investigation or FISA warrant into alleged collusion between the Russians and President Trump, or then candidate Trump and his campaign, but for Hillary Clinton's allegations. She paid this Fusion GPS to go out and create this document that was laundered through the FBI and Justice Department, and the court was never told that it was laundered. Now, that's the whole basis, in my view, for the Mueller investigation as well. You wouldn't have had a FISA warrant without the Clinton dossier. The Clinton dossier was the agencies, the FBI and the Justice Department under Barack Obama's best effort on Russia collusion. They didn't have a case but for that. It's pretty clear. And the whole case was based on a Clinton campaign document. And if there was no case for a FISA warrant, you can bet there was no case to appoint a special counsel to investigate the Clinton dossier allegations. So there are a lot of people who have a lot to worry about as a result of this disclosure today. Andrew McCabe signed off, the number 2, as I mentioned, at the FBI, signed off on this misleading FISA warrant application, it looks like. James Comey, the FBI director who's really jumped off the ledge in terms of attacking President Trump these days, he signed off on the applications, one of the applications. Sally Yates, I think she was former Deputy Attorney General, then she was acting Attorney General under President Trump. She signed off. And then incredibly, Rod Rosenstein, the number 2 at the Trump Justice Department, an Obama holdover, he was a U.S. attorney under Barack Obama, he signed off on this misleading FISA application. The courts were never told about the Clinton ties to the evidence that they were using. In fact, it gets even worse because according to the memo, to further bolster their argument to the court, they highlighted a news report that seemingly corroborated the dossier. Well, of course it did, because it turns out the news report was the result of a leak by the authors of the dossier, the Fusion GPS gang. So it's like going to a court saying, I've got this document proving X. Oh, look, and I talked to a reporter and he reported it too. So now I have two pieces of evidence. Talk about a crock. I just can't believe, and you know, the media is trying to underplay this because they largely hate President Trump. But this is pretty darn serious. This is enough, if the Justice Department was brave enough, to shut Mueller down. And let me tell you the run-up to the release of this memo. So the FBI and the Justice Department went full bore to prevent this memo from being released. They lobbied the president, and thankfully, and to his eternal credit, the president told them, I'm going to release this memo. And after that happened, they went out and publicly opposed the release of the memo. Rank insubordination by the deep staters at the Justice Department and the FBI. I know why Rod Rosenstein would have done it. He may not have a job after all this is said and done. What's Director Wray's excuse over at the FBI for attacking this effort at transparency? And on top of that, these agencies have been protecting stonewalling the release of this information to Congress and to Judicial Watch. As I said previously, these agencies, the FBI and Justice Department, have zero credibility on this Russia investigation and its justifications. It was a scam and a sham. And don't be fooled by the media coverage of this. These are important revelations. They also show, for instance, that the FBI cut off the Fusion GPS spy, Clinton campaign vendor, Steele, but didn't really cut him off because they used a cutout, Bruce Orr, who was a Justice Department official whose wife worked at Fusion GPS. He's talking to Steele, and on top of that, he's getting info from his wife and feeding it back into the FBI. There's almost impossible to see a difference between where the FBI and Justice Department ends and the Clinton campaign begins when it comes to this Russia collusion spying on the Trump team. You know, the FBI and Justice Department's credibility, as I said, has been ruined. Jeff Sessions needs to take control of his Justice Department. Rosenstein has a lot to answer for. He can't be anywhere near the Russia investigation in the least now. And I think they should consider, I've always advocated shutting the Mueller investigation down. Now we've got smoking gun evidence that shows why it should be. Because it's based on a fraud. And this isn't about the ethics of Mueller. Well, it may be, because I may get into that. This is about whether or not you had a reason to fairly appoint a special counsel, and they didn't. The only reason was this dossier. Now the left is going to point to other aspects of the memo saying there was this obscure guy, George Papadopoulos, who met with someone who's in Europe who said the Russians may have the Clinton emails. So they launched a counterintelligence investigation. Well, they couldn't find enough to bring it to the court's attention to get warrants targeting Papadopoulos. So that was weak. There was nothing there. It all was based on a dossier. Again, Andrew McCabe, no friend of Donald Trump, testified to the committee, according to this report, this memo, that there be no FISA warrant, no spying on the Trump team, namely Carter Page, but for this dossier, which was paid for by Hillary Clinton and the Democratic National Committee. Facts withheld from the court, among other things. Shut it down. And so now we've got the FBI, the Justice Department, and the Democrats attacking this document out of the House. The Democrats have their own memo, which I'm sure is about as credible as the Democratic arguments as to not to release this information. And it's no surprise, and this is not being partisan, the Democratic Party paid for this, and they're involved in the scandal. Of course they're going to object, along with the DOJ and the FBI, who was also involved in the scandal. So the perps are objecting to transparency about their transgressions. And thank God that President Trump said, no, we're going to get this information out. And another hero is Devin Nunez, who's head of the Intelligence Committee, who was being viciously attacked. He was, he took a leadership role on this accountability issue early on. He had fake ethics complaints. His reputation has been dragged through the mud by the establishment, the deep state, and his political opposition on the Hill. He hasn't received sufficient support from the leadership until recently. You know, sometimes there are members of Congress who do the right thing, and we should give them credit when credit is due. So now you've got these competing memos. We've got the Republican memo that was released today. The Democrats are going to have some memo that will probably be released later next week about these underlying FISA applications. What was in these requests to spy on the Trump team? The official court documents in this court that is essentially, because it deals with classified information, so we can't see it. So there are ways to see it. You can unclassify it. And so we sued for the records just today. We asked for the underlying FISA application. We asked for the court responses to the applications. So we want to find out what the Justice Department and FBI, and maybe Mueller, was telling the court, how the court reacted, and what were the orders. Why is it we have to rely on politicians and their staff reviewing these underlying documents and, for our own protection, summarizing them? I can't see any good reason to classify everything here. There may be something specifically that needs to be classified, but that's easy to do. President Trump should, I think, order the declassification of this quickly, and the agency should comply. And Congress needs to keep on doing this sort of thing. I mean, it's not perfect to get summary of the underlying documents because, Judicial Watch, we always want the underlying documents. But if it's hard to get and we can't see them in the meantime, a summary ain't all that bad. So maybe we can do more of this, and I would encourage Nunez to do more of this. This is a major issue, and as I said, it's a devastating blow to the Mueller operation. There was no basis for a legitimate investigation into alleged collusion between Donald Trump and the Russians. The only basis was a smear job created by Hillary Clinton political operatives. In fact, it came out there was yet another Clinton dossier, this one created by Cody Shear, who also got it to the FBI supposedly through Fusion GPS. And Cody Shear goes way back. He's a long-time Clinton operative, henchman. So now there are two dossiers. And guess what? We just found a third dossier. This one created by the Obama State Department. We received the documents, and I guess we just released it this week. So what happened is, shortly before President Trump came into office, the Obama State Department gathered intelligence, classified material on Russia activities in elections and public policy fights abroad, specifically in Europe. I don't know if the U.S. was covered because the documents are so heavily redacted we can't tell. And they sent them to their buddy, Ben Cardin, a Democrat from Maryland. So they were vacuuming up classified information, creating a special dossier on Russia, and sending classified information, according to reports at the time, with the express purpose of not allowing the Trump administration to assert its prerogatives on the handling of this classified information and its relations with Russia. The abuses don't stop with the Obama FBI and DOJ. They continued into this Obama State Department. And we want to know how this classified information was gathered, who ordered it, how it was disseminated, and who else has it. And so we're following up. But Judicial Watch exposed a third dossier trying to undermine President Trump. And unfortunately, at this point, we can't trust the Justice Department and FBI to do anything in this regard. They're in cover-up mode. Jeff Sessions has recused himself from Russia issues. He should unrecuse himself, take control back from the Justice Department, from Mueller and the Rosenstein team. and clean house. And Director Wray needs to be read the Riot Act in the least by President Trump. Director Wray, let me go back to Director Wray. He was forced. I don't think he voluntarily or did it because all of a sudden he discovered something wrong. He forced Andrew McCabe, the number 2, out. Andrew McCabe was a Comey crony who was number 2 at the FBI. He actually was acting FBI director for a period of time after Comey was fired, and then he moved back into number 2. Now, McCabe was involved in all the investigations, as you might imagine. As I said, he signed the FISA warrant. He also handled the Clinton investigation for most of its life. The problem with McCabe is he was conflicted and compromised. His wife had run for office in Virginia in 2015 and received nearly $700,000 from Terry McAuliffe, then governor of Virginia, who was about as close to the Clinton gang as you can get without being literally family. And the FBI told big lies to the American people when it was first reported that he didn't need to recuse himself, and they had vetted it thoroughly. It turns out, thanks to Judicial Watch, we found that he ended up having to recuse himself just a week before the 2016 election. So he was not supposed to be on the Clinton email investigation, and he didn't take himself off until the investigation was over for practical purposes. We also found documents showing he was using his FBI account to promote his wife's campaign, which also may be a violation of the law. So he was forced out finally. Now, supposedly there was an IG report looking into some of these issues. He's also alleged to have, there was one report saying he ordered FBI agents to change their 302 reports, which are narrative reports that FBI agents create after they interview someone. FBI agents don't record interviews. If they do, they destroy them. They write narrative reports, and those are the official records of interviews. So I don't know what's in the IG report. Wray has suggested that McCabe was finally forced out because of it. But we, as I said 5 months ago, exposed his compromised involvement in the Clinton email investigation. There's more than enough reason to remove him 5 months ago. My guess is the IG report's going to come out soon, and Wray no longer has an excuse. He knows what's coming, so he gets rid of McCabe and says when the IG report comes out excoriating McCabe, he says, well, I already got rid of him. In the meantime, he's protected him for almost a year. Was McCabe involved in these decisions to withhold information from Congress about the dossier and his involvement in misleading the FISA court? I tell you, the corruption at the FBI leadership level is something that surprises even me. You know, I've been doing work at Judicial Watch. I've been at Judicial Watch for 20 years now. This is the worst scandal I've seen since I've been here. And I'm talking about the whole spying and targeting of Trump and the politicization and abuses of power at the Justice Department and the FBI and the other agencies, and the leaking and the classified records, and the unmasking and all of that. I mean, that whole universe of scandal, it's far worse than Watergate, far worse than Watergate. And it's the worst scandal, at least since World War II. I mean, I really can't think of a comparable scandal historically. I'm sure some historians might point us to something here in the United States that's comparable, but I don't think there is, where you had this all-hands-on-deck attack using the powers of government against a presidential candidate that they didn't like, and lying to the courts to get it done. So let's go on to the next one. It's been a long day here. I started at 5:15 this morning. I didn't tell you, Trump tweeted, did I mention that Trump tweeted us? Oh, well, I mentioned it in the beginning. So in anticipation of the report being released, I was on TV earlier today, as I said, at 5:15 a.m. I'm not asking for applause. I'm just pointing out that I barely can speak as a result of being up so long. The fact is that I made comments that I've said before. which is that Hillary Clinton and the DNC paid for a dossier that was used by the FBI and DOJ in a misleading way to get the FISA court to approve of spying on the Trump team. And President Trump retweeted that comment today. So that was interesting to see, and it's obviously a big boost to Judicial Watch. And I thank you who support our work that puts us in a position to get national attention to our efforts to uncover government corruption. Because, as you can see from this report, we don't just go on TV and pontificate about what's happening. We're in court asking for the underlying documents, trying to force action. We're trying to get the text messages of Andrew McCabe and Lisa Page and Peter Strzok. We're trying to get the dossier documents. We're trying to get the unmasking documents. We've gotten the Clinton email documents. So, and it's good to see our work credited in some part by President Trump. I'm sure it drives the criminal class here in Washington, D.C. crazy to see his promoting our work, but the fact is that we're right, and we correctly predicted what would be in the memo. And that's why Trump, having read the memo, the president felt confident that he could retweet our comment about what had happened. So this has been a busy day here at Judicial Watch. We appreciate you keeping up with us. There was a lot to convey here today. New lawsuits. We sued for the FISA applications, as I said, so we can see the underlying documents. We're obviously standing against the big lies about what the House is trying to do, at least in summarizing some of the scandal documents that are being withheld from the American people. And the President of the United States is paying attention to our work. So not a bad day all in all. So we'll be around next week, I hope. Thanks for joining us this week, and have a great weekend. Tom Fitton out.